What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and the reviews continue to flow in for The Last of Us 2, and we have probably the single spiciest review to date. A review that is even being doubled down upon by this wonderful blue check-marked aficionado of video games. Now, we've seen more and more of them roll in. This coming in from Paul Tassi over at Forbes. The Last of Us Part 2 reviews say it's the best PS4 game exclusive with 44 perfect scores. Now, there is no such thing as a perfect video game. So if you are a video game reviewer and you give your game a perfect score, you are a hack, a fraud, a huckster, a shill. But nonetheless, we already knew most of that. Paul writes, I figured the reviews will be good, but now that the embargo has lifted, The Last of Us Part 2, it's become clear that it's not just good, it's yet another game of the generation, just in time to close out this latest generation console era. See, I don't know, though. You know, I watched some reviews from trusted YouTubers. Skill Up, for all of our disagreements on everything other than video games, I trust his opinion of video games. And he basically lambasted the game, saying he didn't enjoy it, and then it felt clunky, and it didn't feel very advanced, and that the characters were not good. Plus, he also talked about how there's a ridiculous embargo on a piece of the game that is probably very divisive. I'm not sure what it is, but he says it's about 12 hours into the game, and it's not something we already know. I'm not sure exactly. Is it that, you know, Ellie is dating a trans person? I mean, we already knew that. Is there something even more divisive? I don't know. The Last of Us Part 2 currently has a 96 on both Metacritic and OpenCritic, a deeply impressive score that reflects 44 full perfect 10 out of 10s from various outlets, including heavy hitters like IGN and Game Informer, both bought and paid for, by the way. The 96 score makes it the best reviewed PS4 exclusive of the entire generation, putting it above Persona 5 and God of War. Well, it's not ahead of Red Dead Redemption 2, but that's not an exclusive, I suppose you could say. It's also one tick above The Last of Us Remastered at a 95. The only PlayStation 4 or Xbox One game for that matter to score higher is, okay, Red Dead Redemption and GTA 5, both just 1 point higher at 97s. The one was cross-gen. If 96 holds, The Last of Us Part 2 is actually tied for the 23rd best game in history, alongside Half-Life 1 and 2, Breath of the Wild, BioShock, GoldenEye, Resident Evil 4, Mass Effect 2, and Skyrim. That's nuts. According to some reviews I watched, the game was lengthy and boring at parts. There was a 10-hour, essentially, side quest of a 25-hour game that was just a drug, just a drag for people playing the game. So it's so weird that nobody seems to be mentioning this except YouTube reviewers. You see IGN 10 out of 10. It's The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece that evolves in gameplay. Games Radar, Naughty Dog's PS4 is Swan Song, is an astonishing, absurdly ambitious epic. It's only 25 hours, too. Whether or not you consider The Last of Us Part 2 to be worthwhile continuation of Joel and Ellie's story, there's no doubt that Naughty Dog has crafted a sequel that is every bit as ambitious and well considered as the original, with quite possibly the best stealth action gameplay realized to date. That's just verifiably false. Last of Us Part 2, based on reviews of people I trust, is not even that great at stealth. So why would you say it's the best stealth ever? That just seems so at odds with everything I'm hearing from people that have played the game whom I trust, whom don't rely on early access to video games to make their living. GamesBeat says, I said the original game is the very best of what video games can be on the PlayStation 3, and this game available on PlayStation 4 June 19th also represents the very best of what video games can be. And yet IGN, did anyone not like it? Here's a middling review from IGN Japan. Forbes did not receive a review copy of The Last of Us Part 2, and I don't think Jason Schreier did either over at, where is he now, Bloomberg? And we were given no explanation of why after repeated requests for elaboration. I will be buying the game at launch and reviewing it shortly thereafter. After seeing these scores, I genuinely cannot wait to play it. I've loved the first game. I love the first game. I'm thrilled to see what the sequel is living up to, or even surpassing the original. It's a heck of a way to close out the generation, and knowing Sony, they'll repackage it for PS5 and open up the next generation with it as well. The Last of Us Part 2 will be released June 19th. It's interesting. I talked to Eric Kane, who also works for Forbes, and Paul has put this out there. Neither one of them really know why they didn't get a review copy. And even the people that did get review copies, they had to redact things at an absurd level. Here, I don't even know if this article is parody or not, but The Gap, a podcast mostly about video games, kind of, I think, pokes fun at. Few have worked nearly as hard as The Last of Us Part 2. Things got off to a slow start, in my opinion, like any good story. There's setup work involved before we get to the payoff, and Last of Us 2 needs quite a bit of setup. And all this redaction, right? All this redaction. I mean, it's interesting. I remember standing on redacted, worried that continuing progress through the level. I mean, it's interesting to me that there were parts of the IGN review that they can't even say the name of Ellie's love interest, if I remember correctly. So it's really bizarre. Now, maybe this is just poking fun at it, but interestingly enough, it's not that far off. And then we have, when we look at the best PlayStation 4 games in history, Last of Us Part 2, third overall, a simple, tiny point behind Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I would not have given Red Dead Redemption 2 a 97 either, and I loved that game. But I felt like the mechanics were clunky and felt outdated. And, while the story and the landscapes were amazing, the gameplay was not that great. That game was probably a hard 9 out of 10 for me. 9, maybe 92 out of 100 or something like that. 97, that's ridiculous. That's way too high. Same thing with Grand Theft Auto 5, although it's hard to argue, Grand Theft Auto 5 still continues to make billions for the company so many years later. I mean, it's 6 years later, and still people are still playing the game in large amounts. Then you have The Last of Us Part 2, Persona 5 Royale, and The Last of Us Remastered. I know Neil probably is looking at this like, come on, just put them next to each other. Just put them, just get The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 as number 3 and 4 on the list. I'm sure that's what he would love to see. I would. So it's interesting to me, but now we have what might be the spiciest review to date. Here we have Jeff Canada, father, husband, show host, DM, VR enthusiast, and Geeks and Sneaks, apparently. I don't know. The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece of video game narrative. Nothing else even comes close. The story is brutal, challenging, bold, and almost never fun. It's harrowing, forcing the player to confront bad things in the way video games never do. In a medium, and here's where things get spicy, in a medium where everything is John Wick, The Last of Us Part 2 is Schindler's List. And just like that film, there were times when I wasn't sure I could keep going. It is a relentless emotional assault that I suspect will force even the most jaded gamers to feel empathy. Could you rethink the tweet very carefully and remember you're talking about a video game that won't matter in 6 months? And he doubles down, are you for real with this, or are you some sort of parody account? What? Why do people reviewing games feel like video games are inferior to the movie industry? Once every very good game was called Citizen Kane for video games. Games are another medium with many more forms of expression. You can see, like, I get the point you're talking about. It's hard to play this emotionally, but you can't expect everyone to take you seriously when you compare The Last of Us to a fictional video game to a film about the Holocaust. But is Schindler's List or The Passion of the Christ? That's the determination everyone's going to have to make for themselves. I mean, he just doubles and triples down. You see Jason Schreier getting in there with some hilarious roasts as well. You know, and Schreier went hard in the paint too about not getting a review. You could see Kim getting on Jeff. You compared your feelings watching a fictional event of video game to your feelings watching the depiction of probably one of the worst human events in history. If you don't see why that might come off as crass to some of us, I don't know what else to tell you. No outrage here, just exhaustion. Manufactured outrage, I guess the fact that you'd go full how dare you SJW instead of listening to the many people who have tried to explain to you why this comparison is tacky says it all. Schreier is Jewish from what I know. Not that I guess maybe that might lead to more, how do you say, less of personal offense? I don't know. I just think it's a horrible take. You know, and then you see him talking here, replying to Neil. Neil, I would be shocked if you weren't reacting positively to a thread hyperventilating about your game. To an outside observer, it comes off as clumsy and crass. Congrats on the launch. Looking forward to playing. I don't know. I've asked to interview Neil. Was denied. I just realized now that could be right. I was saying Jeff's tweet comes off as okay. Well, nonetheless, I don't know if I would compare a video game to Schindler's List. To me, people reviewing just how terrible a video game made them feel, that's not a selling point for me. But that doesn't mean it won't be a selling point for millions of other people. I'm not sure that this journal, Jeff Kanata's tweet, is going to sell many copies. But nonetheless, it was a hilarious event to view. Do you think The Last of Us 2 is truly going to be a 96 out of 100, like best game ever level? Or do you think that score will come down? I mean, it's pretty much locked in at this point, right? We'll get a lot of people like Forbes and stuff like that coming in after the game is released publicly in a week. So it may drop from there, but I doubt it'll drop much more than that. It'll still, I mean, if it craters, it'll still be a 92 or a 93. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I'll be interested to see what your comments are in the comment section down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.